Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our lunch break today. This is the last lunch break webinar of the year, so we're excited to have you join us. We think we have a really terrific finale for the year with this panel and this conversation today. We're going to talk about out-of-home measurement on the move. So out-of-home has become a critical customer acquisition channel for brands with both physical and digital retail store locations and storefronts. And this development has led to the need to make out-of-home more of a performance-based channel with metrics tied to store visits and sales. Measuring views to visits for multiple ad formats, including out-of-home and moving out-of-home assets like buses and taxi tops, is the topic of today's session. And we're going to hear from a panel of experts on how measuring moving out-of-home campaigns can be really great for business. And we're going to also talk about a few case studies, and we'll hopefully have some time for your questions at the end. So I'm going to introduce the panel now. We have with us Jonathan Gaudet, CEO of Adomni, Gabrielle Tarragano, who is the VP of Out-of-Home and Horizon Media, and Garrett Spitzer, who's the product lead at Uber. Leading the panel today, or moderating, is Jonathan Frangakis, the COO from Reveal Mobile. As I said, we're going to turn it over to the group. I'll come back a little later and do some Q&A from the audience. If you do have questions, please type those into the chat bar, and we'll try to get to those at the end. All right, Jonathan, take it away.
Great, thanks, Steve. So for the last couple of years, at least, I've been saying that I think that the two most exciting areas in out-of-home today are really in programmatic and mobility-based out-of-home. So we've been measuring both forms for quite a few years, dating back to, I think it was like 2016, when we first launched our product for the moving out-of-home with Rapify. And at the time, there really wasn't much in the way of leveraging the gig economy as an out-of-home canvas. But since then, a lot's changed in both landscapes. So I think the best way for us to start is with a quick case study of a moving out-of-home campaign on Uber Out-of-Home. It was bought programmatically by Horizon through Adomni for a very well-known website building platform. It's currently running, so it's still in market. And the client, what they were looking to see was how various media formats, including Uber Out-of-Home, perform to drive folks to a website and take certain actions. So I think a good place to start then is, let's start with Gabby. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to my description of that? And if you could just touch on, why Adomni and why moving out-of-home on this particular campaign?
Sure. So I think, with this campaign, we were really focused on reaching specific neighborhoods that index highest within our audience. So the high impact out-of-home placements being, our first layer of our campaign. At the time when we were going to purchase in Q4, out-of-home was in high demand. So infiltrating the desired areas was slightly challenging. And that's why moving out-of-home really allowed our clients to reach out the areas that we're unable to target with traditional media formats. That's why it made it so appealing.
Yeah, so Jonathan, I think Gabby sort of touched on it, but in your opinion, what is it about moving out of home generally, but particularly in this case with Uber, what is it that makes that platform so compelling, sort of in the context of what Gabby was saying?
Absolutely. So the notion that, these screens are at the street level and sort of everywhere, and the ubiquity of that network, I think is a really big piece of the value proposition that Uberu and moving out of home provides. And so whether you're a pedestrian walking down the street or you are sitting in traffic looking at your windshields, there's just no missing the ads. And I think that's what really drives the ad recall, that drives the product consideration, is just the kind of the characteristics of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Garrett, I assume that you would agree with what Jonathan's saying around the ubiquity of the platform, the ubiquity of out-of-home that your platform brings. But anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We just have this incredible platform to kind of display these ads on. And it also just gives us a great opportunity to continue expanding the program to more and more markets, providing drivers with great earnings opportunities.
Yeah, so we sort of talked about, why the channel itself is so compelling, a little bit, why it made sense in this particular campaign. But I think, as we start moving toward talking about the measurement of it, there's a lot to cover here. And one note I'll make is we're not going to really get into methodology or anything on this call. I think, coming out in the next few months, we're going to have some really great content from the OAAA on best practices around that. So while we I'll help in building that out. Let's focus on when you are partnering with a data platform to help measure moving out of home. Sort of, what are the things that what are the components that are most important to you in that partner or in that methodology when you're selecting a partner? So I'll start. We'll start with Gabby again on this one.
Yeah, so I think like the unique thing about Horizon out of home is that we're able to operate collaboratively across departments within our entire agency. So, within that ecosystem, other Horizon teams look to out of home as the original location experts partnership. So as an agency, we operate from a place of auditing data partners. We work with to ensure that we're using the application quality data across all of our departments. Location partners are audited by third parties that Horizon has collectively approved based on, a close analysis of data variance in terms of data grouping, sourcing, maintenance protocols, privacy, compliance. So I think the need for regular auditing as ongoing practice is definitely something that we see in Horizon.
Right. So, compliance central to it. Obviously, everything around accuracy and sample size plays an important role. And then Jonathan, Garrett, anything else? I'll start with Jonathan on this one again too. Anything else you can expound on when you're partnering with somebody in this space? Like, what is it that stands out to you? Like, how should folks who haven't been able to measure moving out of home in the past or out of home at all, what sorts of things should they be looking for?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in here. Moving out of home is just unique from every other out of home because the vehicle that by definition is in a different place as it's driving around and either picking people up, dropping people off, or in between. And so it does bring some specialization to helping to kind of quantify the audience that was reached, where differently than say a digital billboard where it's a fixed position and you're able to use traffic patterns or mobile device IDs. And that's where partnering with Reveal Mobile and knowing that your platform has for years built in a methodology that takes into consideration the view shed of these cars that is changing, is variable, but yet still arrives at that core impressions per ad play or exposed audience that was within vicinity of the vehicle and the two-sided screen. It was really, really important for this program from an integrity of what we're selling on the Adomni side, which is it's all audience based. It's all impressions as our currency. And so making sure that we did that right and that there was a high fidelity where it went through Horizon's vetting process, to make sure that there is really sound quality data and quantity of data behind the numbers that are being put out there was a really important piece of this. And also just recognizing, I know we didn't want to get into the methodology side of it, but recognizing that there is a recency factor to the data. It's not, modeled, averaged over a long period of time or historical. So there's a recency to it. Was really important from our side. So I would echo what Gabby said. And I'd also say that one other point that's really important is the way that the data flows, where every single vehicle that is serving ads has, is having play logs that are automatically being provided to Reveal to then be able to build the audience exposed and some of the attribution reporting. I think that's a really unique piece of what Adomni and Uber and Horizon have in play here with Reveal, where it's just we're sitting on the data of what was exposed, as opposed to with some other partners that we have on the publisher side, we have to gather that data separately, and it can be kind of difficult even to obtain some of the play logs in some of the cases.
Yeah, that is a pain that I am quite familiar with. So I completely agree with you there. So that, Gabby and Jonathan, you're coming into it from, you've been in the out-of-home industry for quite a while, a lot of expertise, and even where you don't have it in some places, sort of like where to ask the questions. But Garrett, when you guys got into the out-of-home business, this was a new frontier for Uber. And so curious, when you first started, thinking about, hey, this is an acquisition channel for some, this is an advertising channel certainly for all. How do we put some metrics behind it? What did you sort of rely on in terms of finding the best solution to make sure that you were providing the best solution for your clients?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we looked for was really coverage. So as you know, Uber drivers, they drive around the entire city. They also drive to surrounding suburbs. They're across the country. We're international. So we really wanted to make sure that wherever Uber driver goes, we want to make sure that we're properly measuring impressions. And it's incredibly important that we do that accurately so that we can correctly relay to advertisers exactly how many people are seeing their ads. And I think that's why it really became clear to us very quickly that Reveal Mobile was really one of the best players in this space, and that we could really count on them delivering accurate impressions throughout the day, and that we could then take those impressions and do important like foot traffic analysis, website conversion, brand studies, all these great things that clients love. Reveal Mobile has this rich suite of products that they can offer to our advertisers. And I think that's what we really loved about it. And that's what we keep hearing from our clients as well.
Great. All right. So I guess something else that I wanted to sort of go into is, moving out of home is obviously the subject of this webinar, but obviously, in most out-of-home campaigns, it's not the focal point, or certainly not the only format that you're going to be seeing. So one of the things that I think would be important to touch on briefly is, how do you think about moving out of home in terms of measurement? Does it need to be measured separately? Is it siloed off? Or how important is it, Gabby, to you to be able to measure it across, with the same type of approach that you're measuring your other formats with?
Yeah, I think that's really important because, we're looking at everything that is different pieces that need to be measured like individually, but also in aggregate to try and understand kind of how we can optimize our programs moving forward. So I think it's really important not only to see like how the format responds to the audience, but then holistically what that looks like in our lift so we can understand how we can optimize for our next campaign. So I think that's where our insights are always trying to foresee where we can grow and build from there, and which pieces of the puzzle kind of come into play to make that the best program for our client.
Right. So you're coming in with sort of like a strategy, and you apply certain tactics to that. And then the best way to understand how right or wrong you were is to measure it the same way you do, all the other formats. Which sort of leads, I think, nicely into the next point that I wanted to cover, which is how programmatic changes the way that moving out of home is bought and measured. Jonathan, I've heard you riff on this a few times, so I'm gonna turn it over to you. But when you are when you do have sort of like these fine point insights into how a certain format is performing, what is programmatic? How does programmatic change how you can react to that?
Sure. There definitely are a few sides to the equation. The notion that, all of the data from the ad serving side and what played and reporting side is very granularly delivered and reported on, enables us to do attribution reporting post-campaign or mid-campaign really easily, because we're sitting on all the ingredients that are necessary to put into an exposed versus control model. And so I think that's probably the first real major value proposition, that with, you know, either traditionally bought digital out of home or static, it you know, play logs and gathering all that data can be sort of cumbersome, versus, you know, programmatic, just we're sitting on it. I'd also say that, you know, with programmatic, that you have the ability to swap out content or create certain sort of geofence rules or triggering rules that enable you to not only measure the entire flight, but also to get like one level deeper and say, when I'm doing this particular promotional content versus this brand content, how do I look at those groups, and, you know, of who, what those devices that were exposed did differently. I think programmatic just unlocks another layer there for analysis. And ultimately, you know, programmatic is expected when you're doing it with online, that there is accountability to it. There is reporting. You know, you're looking at both mid-campaign and post-campaign results. And digital out of home just recently, over the last few years, has made that possible with mobile device IDs and sort of, you know, and looking at what those device IDs did after they were exposed. So you blend all those things together, and a lot of brands are having their digital departments look at the channel and look at these opportunities as new incremental ways to layer on to the display ads and the video ads that they're doing elsewhere.
Right. So it's giving you sort of, you know, we sometimes call in stride. It's giving you these points that you can optimize on. But then you certainly need, and that's great insight for somebody like Abby. But you will need then a platform in which you can sort of like, you know, action on those bring those optimizations into reality.
And buyers love that. You know, I think historically it's been just, here's an ad, here's the campaign flight details, and just let us know when the campaign ended or how many ad plays or spots were delivered. We now can add that next level of performance reporting and accountability that not only the out-of-home buyers sort of have always wanted to have, that we really haven't been able to, but also the digital buyers. It's kind of table stakes, you know, for them to really lean in and apply significant amounts of their investment. We need to be able to prove it to the decision makers how it's actually contributing.
Yep. I definitely see that. And sort of from that, you know, we're talking about all these different types of, you know, optimizations that you can make in Stride. You know, one thing I think, and we can certainly fall outside of the confines of the case study that we started off discussing, but what are these metrics? Like what are the metrics that are important to your clients? And I think, you know, we all have our own view of this. But I'd like to start with Garrett on this one, because he has, you know, they have a really, you know, sort of fascinating dynamic within Uber, which is the fact that, you know, Uber Eats can leverage it. So let me start with you, Garrett. If you could tell us a little bit about that, and sort of what metrics are important to those clients.
Yeah, thanks for asking, John. I think one of the coolest things that we can do with Uber is, with these restaurants, a lot of times they'll want advertisements, maybe like a 1 block or 1 mile radius from their restaurant. And they might want these advertisements to spike during, let's say, like lunch or dinner time. So we can selectively target these restaurants and deliver all of our impressions in certain time windows and within, let's say, a 1 mile radius of that restaurant. And we found that is super impactful to these restaurants. They love that they can see the ads more frequently. People nearby can see it more frequently. Another thing that we've really found that resonated with these restaurants is that can then tie, if someone saw a car top ad, did they then place an order on Uber Eats? And so Reveal has been a ton of help in allowing us to link those two actions. But we can then tell these restaurants, here's your return on ad spend. You spent $1,000 on advertising, you got $5,000 in orders. And we can tell that by directly linking the car top viewings to orders placed on Uber Eats. So there's a lot of kind of exciting things we can do with mobility data that we have. And we found that Eats restaurants really love that data.
Right. I think that's just like an absolutely fascinating use case, is to sort of this like end-to-end closed loop capability. And in that case, we're talking specifically about placing orders in an app, so that's an in-app conversion. But Jonathan or Gabby, what other sorts of metrics do you find in a more traditional sense for the more traditional clients that you find are important to them?
Yeah, I think similar to kind of what Jonathan was saying before, like the seamless connection with, Reveal and Uber out of home and Adopt was important for us because these metrics are seamlessly linked, providing like data integrity. And then I think, having the ability to skip the step of collecting the logs and having all aspects of easily documented is like a step that helps our team to make sure that everything's captured properly. I think overall it's great to see the lift by, format. The insights that we're able to get are valuable, like as I said before, with planning our next program and how we can optimize. I think, holistically it's important because, we're always changing formats that we include in that media mix, but also learning out how to test new markets that we're entering and what that media mix might look like and how that works. Another thing that I think is really cool is the ability to see how like creative impacts each other. So if one, creative tagline had a higher impact with our lift over another, that's also insights that are valuable for us to use moving forward to see what resonates best with the audience.
Yeah, and we don't have to get specific into how anything actually performed, but curious, Gabby, do you, using this as an example, like acquiring Uber through Adopt, does the format on its own deliver on the metrics that your clients are interested in?
Obviously, I think we're still running in market. So I think we have to, see where all of that goes once you get the results. But I definitely see there's so much value to it, especially with the fact of being able to just infiltrate areas that are limited to out of home or we weren't unable to reach because of demands in the marketplace when we were going to plan. I think the audience, a higher household income audience, is very niche, that some areas that we're out of home is limited or zoned out. Where as another layer of our program.
Jonathan?
Yeah. Traditionally with even programmatic digital home, it's been looking at a post-campaign report and seeing, how many impressions were reached or where ads were served, sort of in a regional basis, zip code basis, and then what CPM was paid. But for, the campaign that's running right now with Horizon on Uberu, the ability to actually quantify website visits and the lift in website visits from audiences exposed to the Uberu toppers versus a control group that wasn't, is like that next dimension where you can actually say, here was our pre-period, here was our, once the campaign started, and across this period, we were able to drive X% more visits to the website. And of those, we were able to drive Y% more conversions, which is either like purchasing a product or signing up for, the service. That's something that, a lot of big brands, this is just the standard for when you're doing a digital campaign that you're putting in a certain amount of dollars and then measuring the efficacy. Our ability to do that holistically as a channel, and then also be able to go down to the format level and say, here's how the Uberu contributed to the lift, here's how digital billboards contributed, and then use those findings to then craft the next campaign with a bit more confidence or a bit more learnings that you can optimize to get a better result.
Yeah. So I think we covered a little bit about what sort of metrics are important to these clients. One thing that I wanted to also throw out to the crowd, what are any incremental considerations that need to be made while you're thinking about measuring this? I don't know, I would call it a somewhat nascent channel within out of home, if there is one. Any additional considerations that you would offer to the crowd?
I've got a couple. Creative is something that I think is a is a growth opportunity for us as an overall channel. I think sometimes we go with a more simplistic approach to what we're saying, and the notion that, especially with channels like Uber or platforms like Uberoo, where you're seeing these all day, every day in many of the major markets, your ability to either do day parting or your ability to cycle out the creative every 10 or 14 days so that there's just like a fresh reason to look at the screen or get something new out of it is something I think the savviest of marketers are starting to take some of the approaches they're doing with social media advertising and doing the same thing in the physical world. And so creative would be something that I definitely encourage planners and buyers to just push on their creative teams to do more with the channel. I'd also say that, the data side of things, the targeting, historically they've been market-wide buys or whatnot. And if we can get those audience attributes, which I know Horizon reveals, audience segments, that can inform, from a programmatic DSP perspective, inform where and when to serve the ads. So even though they're everywhere, there still might be higher relevancy if we, like Garrett was saying earlier, do lunch and dinner time for a restaurant brand, but also in certain neighborhoods as well, layered on. So those are just two add-ons I want to put out there, is the creative and then the audience sort of inputs.
Yeah, and you touched on something I think really cool. Could you talk about AMP a little bit and how you use that, and to do what you described at the beginning, where there's an audience and you need to reach it?
Yeah, for sure. So AMP is our audience mapping portal, which is our proprietary platform. And we work with Reveal to help understand kind of the audience segments and the details that we can use for our planning platforms. So, we'll build out a lookalike audience with the data, work with Reveal to kind of layer that into our planning platform and then see a heat map. So we can take that information and then really understand kind of like which areas are hot and which areas are not for the audience, and then use that insight to then develop our plans and our segments. So I think that's where we start to see details of our recommendation that, maybe an area of coverage that we would have overlooked. Once we see in the mapping tool, we see, oh wait, this area really does resonate with our audience. Maybe this is a missed opportunity if we didn't go to cover this. And that's insight that we can share with our clients as well. If, let's say, they come to us with specific areas that they're looking to reach, we can then kind of give some insight into some areas that, they may not have thought of that really would make sense. And then all of our measurement and testing kind of then will help to, in the end, could show the case that why that was the right choice. And then that's how we can continue to optimize and learn as we're going.
Right. So as you're planning, you'll often find, a lot of times you want to reach an audience, you can find out-of-home inventory in that area, but in the instances where you can't, this is a great audience amplification tool. But understanding how well that actually works is central to whether or not it, being able to measure how well it works is central to understanding whether or not it worked. Obviously.
Exactly. Yeah. So it just all kind of comes back together, using our planning tool, but then also having that measurement to prove out the use case. Right.
Yeah. And so, a few of the things that we touched on is sort of around the nuance that not just measuring, out of home. I feel like measuring out of home in general is fairly nuanced. But now when out of home moves, it becomes particularly more, niche. And so to level set, without getting into methodology much here, the measurement of out of home is really always existed around, this idea that there's a point in the ground, we can draw a geofence around it or a view shed, and understand, some sample of the people that came in and out of that area. Now, mapping them to some conversion environment, that's pretty straightforward. Then, when you layer in digital, as we understand in out of home, particularly programmatic, just because somebody was in front of a sign, in no way guarantees that they were exposed. They could have been there while that creative wasn't actually running. So that, getting the ad logs, everything we touched on at the beginning, that's another layer of complexity. But now in this case, we have not just the audience around that is moving, not just the time is fluid as well, but also that point of interest is moving. So there's all these layers of complexity that sort of get, put together. And we sort of breezed over that at the beginning. There is a definite, there's definitely, increased complexity in understanding the hardest part here, which is just getting to exposure, like who was exposed to this moving point of interest. And so, you put all those into a bottle and shake them up, and you get the output of what we got on this, on the campaign that we're talking about today. And so I think it's, we're all pretty excited to see how those results pan out, and hopefully we can publish a case study around it. But there was, just for the audience, there's a lot of moving parts and being able to actually deliver on that, on those metrics. So I think another piece that I wanted to cover is, we're always thinking about sort of like these interesting, different ways to leverage our data sets and adjacent data sets to drive more value to our customers. And so I kind of wanted to ask the group, are there any relevant, new and interesting ways that y'all are working with data to, particularly as it relates to programmatic and moving out of home, to drive more value? Let's start with Jonathan.
So a couple kind of really nascent and exciting applications of data that we have been working with Uber to almost pioneer, and also with some of our other data partners. Uber's unique, right? They've got those millions of drivers and millions of users and millions of kind of pickup locations and destination locations. And so if the name of the game in advertising is providing the most relevant message to an audience in an area that has an opportunity to do something with it, I think brands who have been so conditioned to doing this in online, where it's one-to-one, and either contextually what website they're on or what app they're in, what their interest might be, or you're actually using kind of first-party data or even PII data with some of these applications. Well, we have to be cognizant that we're a one-to-many medium, so we're not going to necessarily be truly one-to-one, and we also have to be cognizant that we don't want the creep factor, of someone's past Uber, where they've been or where they're going, being sort of used in a creepy way. But we've been working with Uber, and maybe Garrett could talk a little bit about this, in a consumer privacy compliant way, be able to put a message up for someone that would find it relevant based upon where they're either being picked up or where they're going. And so I want to tee that up for Garrett, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because it's something new that's coming. And then I have one other point that I want to make after Garrett kind of shares a little bit on that.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up, Jonathan. So I think one great example of this is, let's say you're an alcohol brand, and you know that a rider, for instance, is going to a bar. Showing that alcohol ad right as the kind of Uber car picks up the passenger and then drops off the passenger at the bar. We think that's incredibly impactful. It's hyper relevant, as Jonathan was mentioning, and we think that value to that rider is much, much higher because how targeted it is. So that's just one example of like what we can do here. But I really think kind of the possibilities are endless. We have tons of mobility data, and as Jonathan mentioned, as long as we're doing it in like a very privacy conscious way, we can really create some huge value for advertisers here.
And given that it's all being delivered 100% programmatically, this isn't even hard to implement. It's another, just like today you can put into a DSP, I'm trying to reach this demographic, you can also kind of layer in some of those interests and whatnot, so that using, the points of interest database that Uber maintains, we can map those to sort of audience affinities and do exactly what Garrett just stated there. It's, that Heineken ad appearing on the top of the car when you're about to go walk into a bar, and they're going to say, what would you like this evening? That just being able to have that recency and almost incept that product placement on the path to purchase. It's very early days for this, but what we're trying to do with programmatic is elevate the medium to be more than just top of the funnel brand only, and really impact people's decision making mid and toward the bottom of the funnel by using a smart ways of applying data. And another one I wanted to bring up that's just close to my heart, being a Vegas guy, and also just with what's going on in the country, is sports betting, and every state right now is going through some metamorphosis of accepting mobile sports betting, and just thinking about, you know, the screens that we have that are all internet connected, that are all hyper localized, being able to put either live sports betting odds or or probability to win, or the upcoming matchups, where you're walking down the street in New York City and it's like the Giants versus the 49ers, and then there's odds, or it's will Saquon Barkley score more than 2 touchdowns, and having that content like on the tops of the Ubers, on digital billboards, on link NYCs, being echoed around you, but being changed regularly, where it gives you a reason to want to look at the screen. I'm personally, and Adomni is investing a lot into dynamic content and the ability to unlock these things, and it just becomes a limitation of the creativity of the advertiser and what they want to do with a medium that truly is, every ad play is an opportunity to potentially say something else. So those are 2 examples that that when we think about new data, where the car is and where it's going, and then also just what dynamic elements can we put on the creative itself, I think take the channel to a whole new level.
Jonathan, that was 2 Giants references in one monologue. I took you for a Raiders guy, but maybe we have more in common than I even knew. Yeah, and a lot of the things that we're talking about, I mean, just in most of these sort of like innovation focused conversations, all center around this idea that, okay, out of home has historically been thought of, like you said, top of funnel brand awareness. And increasingly, I think most recently, as like the CACs on Facebook and Google just become completely, untenable. And television audiences become more and more fragmented. This is a common refrain that we hear, but out of home is certainly like has its moment in the sun to move a little bit further down the funnel. And what we found, convenient for a lot of us, but certainly like empirically, what we have found is that out of home certainly does deliver on a lot of those, mid and lower funnel metrics. Is, Garrett was talking about placing orders on the, return on ad spend, which is historically a difficult thing to extrapolate. But when you can link those things, those conversion events together with the exposure events, then, you have this really compelling narrative that yeah, out of home does work for a top of funnel brand awareness, but it can also drive a return on ad spend when you're looking at, this exposed and control methodology. So I think that's sort of the, what we hear as a theme throughout a lot of these conversations. But I kind of wanted to point out that that's basically the same thing that we're talking about today. So Gabby, I know it's really our job to sort of bring you these sort of ideas and you guys figure out a way to get them to work with your customer. But is there anything else that you want to add to that part of the conversation, new and interesting ways of applying data for out of home?
I mean, I think I totally align with like everything you guys are saying. I think working on so many direct response brands, like obviously our creativity is key. Like I think us trying to figure out the best way to get our audience to respond is really important in that regard. And I think that's where, for us really pushing outside of the box of creative and how we can push that to be something that would resonate with the specific person. Yes, it's one in the end. Yes, it's one to many, but this allows us the ability to focus on somewhat of a one-to-one interaction, and then tying that back to the measurement and the exposure and seeing how that person reacts to the ad is really just so valuable for some of the brands that I work on.
Yep. Exactly. So I think right on time here. I kind of wanted to allow some time for questions, unless there's anything else from the group that doesn't get hit on questions.
Hey
But if there
there.
isn't,
Hi, guys. Well, Jonathan, great job moderating. Thank you.
thanks.
And Abby and Jonathan again, and Garrett, thanks for your time today, guys. Great stuff. We do have some questions. And I'm glad we left some time for it. Let me ask you guys. So GeoPath certainly is providing measurement currency for the industry. Are you guys fully engaged with measurement at GeoPath? Is GeoPath supporting the moving media segment?
I'll say, I think just as the moderator of the panel, our focus certainly for today was as sort of those solutions are getting rolled out to more places. The focus of what we're talking about is measurement, not in terms of, what I would call impression quantification. We're
Yep.
talking about, I'll say what the out-of-home industry is sort of mistermed attribution. But this is, or, maybe for the accuracy's sake, incremental lift analysis. So distilling the impact that out-of-home has, or that exposure to out-of-home has on some action you take, whether it be in the real world or on Uber Eats or, on the online where you're, building a website, whatever that action is. Whereas I think what that question is more driving at is like, who's counting impressions? And, I don't think that was really the point of today, because to be quite honest, that's a constantly evolving conversation. I think certainly accelerated more recently, but over the last 5-7 years, as long as, we've been in the space since 2014, that question has sort of been evolving.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, in this hyper digital out-of-home world, how important is an independent verified proof of play to agencies, Gabby? And is that something you guys are sort of always looking for?
Yeah, I think that's really important to understand, what we're getting. I think that's the benefit that we have of working so closely sometimes with Reveal for measurement, is the ability to then have those ad logs being checked and our proof of performance, being provided. So I definitely think that's very important to have that verified. And that's why working with some of the measurement studies that we try to include as often as possible are even more important to verify that the data is accurate.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So can Uber out of home be acquired and measured through direct sales, or is it only offered through programmatic channels?
Yes, so we have recently rolled out direct sales as well. So yeah, in addition to working with agencies, working programmatically, we do direct sales as well.
Oh, great. What markets do you reach? Are you pretty much in all markets where Uber runs, which is pretty much all markets?
Yeah, so we have over 3,000 car shops live. We're live in 7 markets. So New York, LA, Boston, Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, and Phoenix. And we have ambitious expansion plans for 2022 as well.
Oh, excellent. That's great news. Gabby, can you think of some good applications for moving out of home? You talked a lot about them today, but some other things that maybe are great ways to think about this particular channel, like, this execution or this reason or this purpose or this objective or goal is a great reason to use moving out of home media.
So I think obviously, audience is key for us with trying to figure out the ways to reach and using that. So the programmatic aspect of being able to reach your audience is very important to us. At Horizon, I think that the ability to have the dynamic creative is also something that's so evolving and changing. I think the perfect example is the gambling category that's growing so quickly, and the ability to have the live odds or live scores or details that you're able to have in real time just really does put a different spin on out of home and kind of have the ability to think of the channel in a different way than people are used to referring to out of home.
Absolutely. Great. I have an interesting question here. Is measuring moving out of home CCPA compliant? And how are you dealing with privacy issues?
Yeah, I can jump on that one since we're probably the most versed on it. I think that sort of touches to the points that all three of the panelists were making is that, partnering correctly will help you on this. So CCPA is certainly and GDPR to go along with that are certainly cumbersome regulations in a lot of ways. So, a good data provider on this is central to making sure that because, I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with CCPA, but just because it's your vendor that broke the law, that doesn't obfuscate you from any issues or any fines. So, there should be, and in a lot of cases, or in some cases there are, a data room that you can go into and see the CCPA compliance that the vendor, has stood up. And so having that, there's so many different things, like the phone number that they have to be able to dial, which, that was when, we were still Mira when we first became CCPA compliant. Like just that was a whole thing that we had never thought through. And somebody should start a business just answering CCPA phone calls. But so, yeah, the short answer to your short question is yeah, it absolutely can be, as long as the data provider is going through the steps required and going through their own data audits and third-party audits of their providers or of their data. And the best way, not everybody's going to be an expert in CCPA, but I think an important, a good way to try to figure that out is look at who they're handling data for already. Like, I think obviously Horizon's a great endorsement, but how can you be sure that you are in good company, I suppose is the best way to say that.
Oh, right. Yeah, I guess, and it's something we all have to think about today. It's very, very important. And as you say, there can certainly be harsh ramifications if you're not complying. How do you guys think about statistical significance of the results? How large do campaigns need to be in order to measure a statistical significant result?
Yeah. You guys mind if I jump on that one too?
And then everybody can.
Yeah. So this is a question we get a lot. How many impressions do we need to allocate in order for a campaign to yield a statistically significant result? And it's a bit of a misplaced question, because the example I always use is, say, Adidas buys a bunch of blacked out billboards to kind of go along with their brand, and then wonder why it's not driving more people into the store. You could allocate 17 billion impressions to that, and it's not going to drive anybody to the store because there was no call to action. There's no logo on there. It doesn't actually, do anything. So the better question is, how many impressions can I allocate in order to find a statistically significant result if one does exist? And so easiest way for us to think about it is we set a lower threshold. And this is just for us. The way that we do it is we say 10 million or more impressions allocated to it. Really good chance that if a statistically significant result exists, we'll be able to measure it. Once you go below that, we really need to start looking at how many people go to the website, or how many people walk into those retail locations, and start figuring out different things. And then usually what we'll do is we'll say, hey, at 7, if you give us 7 million impressions, we will be able to see a lift as small as 5% or something along those lines. And then statistical significance is pretty central to our reporting, is, folks that work with us will be able to tell you, but there is, particularly as you're doing this incremental lift analysis with the pre-post control exposed, you can report your confidence intervals. And usually what we report is a 95% confidence. And if it's below that, we say it was statistically insignificant.
Yeah. Well, the methodology used to measure Uber that we're talking about today, Uber out of home, I assume that methodology could be applied to buses and other transit. Are you guys talking to other transit partners about expanding beyond the moving vehicle into some of the other areas of transit media?
Oh yeah, sure.
Measured across all the formats in time.
Yeah, in market today. I mean, we've been measuring buses, wrap cars, car tops, trains, planes, and automobiles for since 2018, I would say. I think 2017, 2018 is when we started that.
So you're well versed in all of it. That's great.
Yes.
Well, listen, thank you all. I think that's our questions for today. Great topic, great subject. smart people giving us great answers. Thank you, Gabby, Garrett, Jonathan, and Jonathan. We do appreciate your expertise and time today. As I mentioned, this is the last webinar from OAAA for the year. We hope you've enjoyed our lunch break series and our masterclass programs this year. And please know that OAAA staff is hard at work developing our plans and ideas for next year. And we'll be back at you in early January with a calendar of new interesting topics and subjects to cover. So again, thank you all. Hope you enjoy the rest of the month and happy holidays to everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Go for it. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.